understand how controversial and divisive discussions on topics of sexuality and gender can be, especially when those conversations involve children. I would therefore ask that as we work through implementing these policies, that we, as adults in this province, do all we can to depoliticize the discussion and focus on the well-being of the children involved, whether they are young people identifying as transgender or who find themselves attracted to those of the same sex, or simply trying to understand the complex and often changing emotions and feelings of being teenagers. They all need our unconditional love and support. And it's to those children and teens that I want to say just how much we love you and support you in becoming the person you want to be. You never have to feel alone or isolated. If you do, reach out to your parents, family members, teachers, a coach, or other trusted adults and ask for support. We, as the adults in your life, will be there for you to make sure you know just how amazing and precious you are. Thank you for listening.
So that's her presentation in full. I thought it was very full of heart, full of sensitivity and compassion. And I thought it was quite balanced. In fact, some will likely argue that Danielle Smith is aiding and abetting transgenderism by looking to establish doctors in Alberta to complete sex change transitions just for adults. What she's doing is saying that children won't be allowed to make those decisions in Alberta at all, and in some cases in Alberta without their parents' support. And it makes sense. Try getting a tattoo if you're under 18. You can't. Try buying alcohol. Try voting. Try doing many things. You simply aren't allowed to do it before you're 18 because the government knows that you're not a fully formed grown-up. You're not as thoughtful and mentally experienced as possible. You're subject to persuasion and trickery. There's a saying, taking candy from a baby. It's because the baby doesn't know, isn't savvy enough to push back. I thought that was a very balanced approach. And what was interesting was the discussion of bullying. There's an enormous amount of bullying going on, but the bullying I see quite often is from transgender women against anyone else who disputes them, against women, for example. I mean, following David Menzies' coverage of trans craziness around the country, and what's so shocking to me every single time is that mums and dads of girls are too terrified to stand up to these transgender bullies. Terrified not so much for physical punishment, but because they'll be deemed transphobic and marginalized and canceled. What Danielle Smith here is really doing is saying, you don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm going to be the bad guy for you, and I'm going to say there's no more transgenderism in sports. You can have women's sports and men's sports, and for people who are transgender, they can have their own third sports league, but they're not going to be able to smash women to pieces anymore. Now, of course, the reaction from the left, in my opening, I said liberals. It's not even liberals. It's the woke left. Here's Rachel Notley, who has recently announced her departure as the NDP leader, but she's still the NDP leader for now. I have a couple of clips from her and a couple from the federal Liberals. She says that this is clearly unconstitutional. Here, take a look.
There's no question that this horrifying policy will be tested and rejected by our courts. As such, the Premier will likely consider using the notwithstanding clause, which is yet another conservative attack on our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You know, if the courts are telling you that your policy is attacking the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the rights of individual citizens, that should be a clear indication that you're not doing the right thing. We in the NDP believe that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is an essential foundational document for all Canadians, and that human rights must be protected no matter whose human rights and what human rights we are focused on preserving. I'm not here to suggest that the federal government has to role to come in and yell at health ministers. Health ministers provincially have the obligation under the Constitution to administer their programs in alignment with our charter. So we don't need the federal government to tell us whether this is right or wrong. What we need is for a health minister to administer their services legally. And what I'm saying here is that I think we will probably find that we're moving outside of that.
Is this policy going to result, you think, in more attempted suicides, more marginalization of transgender youth, and more discrimination?
I'm so deeply, deeply concerned for what this means for transgendered and other marginalized youth within the queer community. We know that that houseless children disproportionately come from those communities because the relationships with their families have broken down. I was shocked and really angry, and I have to tell you, it's hard to get me angry at Danielle Smith these days because every day is a day. But when she suggested that the solution for a child who was rejected by their parents was to find support through our child protection services, I almost leaped through the computer.
You know, I know a little something about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I've read it probably 50 times. Section 33 is called the Notwithstanding Clause, which basically, as the courts say, it's a dialogue between the courts and the legislature. And the courts can say something's unconstitutional, but the legislator can say, well, thanks for that, but in this one case, we'll pass the law notwithstanding that the court says it's unconstitutional. It's Section 33 of the Charter. I don't know if Rachel Notley's actually read the Charter, because how can using Section 33 of the Charter be against the Charter? It makes no sense. I think she may be right that Danielle Smith may have to use the notwithstanding clause to stop meddling unaccountable judges from overturning her. That may well be the case, but that's certainly not illegal. In fact, it is the essential condition upon which the Charter was turned into our constitutional document. Did you notice that one journalist who asked a question, will this cause more suicides? That's emotional blackmail. If you don't let these kids cut off their body parts, they'll commit suicide. No, it's actually the opposite way around. I should dig up the study. I remember doing a show on it a couple of years ago, that people, young, confused teens especially, if they go through with the drug therapy, and especially, God forbid, if they go through with the surgery, cutting off their breasts or their genitals, their likelihood to commit suicide goes up. Because if they're emotionally troubled, mutilating your body, pumping yourself full of drugs, and cutting off your body parts will not make it better, even if some doctors and activists say so. And that's just emotional blackmail, and it's BS. I think that you can see that it's the media political industrial complex that is pushing transgenderism, not severely normal folks, not parents. Here's the second clip of Rachel Notley. Take a look.
I'm very troubled by what they're talking about. You know, there are complex issues in there, but they have reached in to an area that is broad and complicated around ensuring that a whole range of medical interventions are managed in a way on a sport by sport basis that ensures competitiveness. They've reached in and pulled out one example and lifted it up as the dog whistle that this is really meant to be. And so it's very inconsistent. And and the starting point for me is that a trans woman is a woman and a trans man is a man. And this is an issue that Danielle Smith is pursuing because of extremist politics, not because there's a massive call for it amongst Albertans right now. I can tell you that. I really believe that this push is the approach to the sports issue is, as I said, it's not even broad-based and thoughtful. It is very targeted and irrational in its targeting. It doesn't even make sense. So what it is it's about pandering to the most extremist element of what remains of the Conservative Party in Alberta. That's what that's about.
I don't know what she meant by the sports example is extreme. If you've been watching David Menzies' coverage or any other coverage of transgenderism in sports, it's the men who often aren't on meds or haven't cut off their body parts, who are just competing to beat up women. To beat them, second-rate men figured out they can win contests if they call themselves a girl. And that's unfair, it's unsportsmanlike, it's cheating. But it's what I talked about when I read that excerpt from 1984. And that's what Rachel Notley herself said. A trans woman is a woman. A trans man is a man. No. It's 4 fingers. No matter how you punish Winston Smith, 4 fingers is still 4 fingers. The whole purpose of transgenderism is to get you to say 4 fingers is 5 fingers or 3 fingers or whatever they say. By the way, you know who's extreme on this? Rachel Notley and the media. Here's a poll that Angus Reid did a few months ago when New Brunswick was taking similar baby steps towards giving parents information about what's going on with their kids. And if you can see, they polled Alberta too. 88% of Albertans want informed consent for this sort of thing. 88%. Can you tell me anything else that 80% of the population agrees on?